بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to episode 22 of the series Filtering Out What the Prophet ﷺ Never Said. Someone asked, they said, I have another question. Today the Imam of the Masjid I went to said a hadith and I was wondering about its authenticity. I don't remember the exact wording, but he said the Prophet ﷺ was praying night prayer and he was so overwhelmed by sleep that he fell asleep during sujood. It's a long story, but long hadith that he mentioned. He said the hadith was very long, but I want to know specifically about the sport since it has to do with the aqidah. Barakallahu fi. So before we mention the authenticity of this hadith, I want to point out to something which unfortunately is an issue. Many speakers, not everyone, but a lot of speakers, a lot of shuyukh, du'at, they might be quoting a hadith, and even sometimes if it's authentic, but because they're not paying close attention as they're quoting it, as they're mentioning it, they change some of its meaning or add things to it, add details that are not part of it, change some of the wordings, things of that nature. So it's important to mention this, to emphasize that just as important as it is for us when we quote a hadith to make sure it's authentic before we quote it, if it is authentic, then we can quote it, but we should be mindful to quote it exactly the way it is. Be careful about the wording we use so we don't misconvey the meaning of the hadith, or we don't add things into it, and it ends up being a different hadith altogether. So for example, in this, the brother mentioned that, in this hadith, in his question, he said that the Prophet ﷺ was praying night prayer. He was so overwhelmed that he fell asleep during sujood, and because of this, he missed Fajr prayer. This isn't part of the hadith. This isn't part of the actual narration of the hadith. If anything, the actual hadith mentions that the Prophet ﷺ didn't come out to Fajr prayer early on during its time, as he usually would, but rather he came out later. It was still during its time, before sunrise. He came out towards the time of sunrise, so towards the end of Fajr prayer's time, closer to sunrise, but before sunrise, and then he led his companions in Fajr prayer. So he actually did pray Fajr, led his companions in Salah before sunrise. That's to show us the importance of conveying the correct wording and the meaning of the hadith, because our ahadith, these ahadith are part of our deen. The authentic sunnah is what we base our deen on. So it's important for us to be accurate and convey the exact wordings of them. So this hadith is authentic. It's a longer hadith. I'll post a link to it in the description, inshallah, for those who are interested in reading the whole hadith. But to keep this episode short, we'll make a few comments on things. It's a lengthier hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions that he saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his dream. The Prophet ﷺ saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best image, the best surah. And the rest of the hadith, again, you can go and read that hadith for yourself. Again, I'll post that link in the description. But a few points or comments to note. The one is the translations out there, and the link that I'm going to post is to a very well-known website that has a hadith, the books of hadith in it. But the translations out there aren't the best. That's the thing that inshallah, I do hope that in the future that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy, I have a project in mind that I do want to provide an online database of a hadith in which people can go and search, find the text of the hadith in Arabic, the accurate translation of it in English, the degree of its authenticity based on what the scholars have classified it and graded it, as well as a brief explanation of the meaning of the hadith. So inshallah, that's something that I think is definitely needed in the English language. Unfortunately, the closest websites to that don't actually offer that in a proper way. A lot of the hadith are mistranslated. It's bad translations, or just very they're not good translations. The other point to make is regarding this hadith, that some people, because it mentions this hadith, this authentic hadith mentions some of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some people unfortunately understand this hadith by falling incorrectly, and they fall into comparing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His creation. And we know that's incorrect. There's nothing like Allah. We can't compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His creation. And on the other hand, some people go to the other extreme and then they negate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they try to misinterpret them. And as we know that the correct understanding, the proper belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we believe in them, we affirm their meaning, but we don't compare Allah to any of His creation. Of course, as Allah says in the Quran, in the verse, which, this really sums up how to understand and view the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There's nothing like Him. There's nothing like Allah. There's nothing like Allah. So don't compare Allah to anyone, because there's nothing like Allah. And the other part of that same verse, and Allah is the all-hearing, as-Sami', the all-seeing, al-Basir, affirming those attributes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other piece that this hadith mentions about Allah informing the Prophet ﷺ of certain things that he didn't know of. This hadith mentions the dispute or the discussion of al-Mala al-A'la, the highest exalted gatherings or group or assembly of angels that were disputing about certain things. So, it mentions that Allah informed the Prophet ﷺ or gave him knowledge of what they were disputing about. And so, if we look at the context of this hadith, it's talking about what the angels were discussing. That's the kafarat, those things that expiate, the actions that cause expiation of one's sins, and the darajat, the things that elevate a person's rank or level or raises their reward. Those are the things that they are discussing. Which is better? Which is more rewarding from these actions? As the hadith mentions, if you go back and read the full text of it, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ was given knowledge of. It's not unlimited knowledge. The knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ is not unlimited, is not infinite. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. The Prophet ﷺ only knows what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught him, has revealed to him. So it's important to understand that within that context and not believe, as some people mistakenly believe, that the Prophet ﷺ knows everything, that they give him an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they misunderstand this hadith or other texts or make claims that the Prophet ﷺ knows everything. No, the Prophet ﷺ he doesn't know everything. Only Allah knows everything, and the Prophet ﷺ only knows what Allah has revealed to him, what knowledge Allah has given him. So, to sum it up, again, this hadith is an authentic hadith, and I'll post the link to it in the description if you're interested in reading the Arabic text of it, the actual text of the Arabic of that hadith, or the translation, again, keeping in mind that the translations aren't always, that are out there online, aren't the best. And inshallah ta'ala, if you have any other hadith or stories that you've heard that you'd like to verify, post them in the comments, send them to me by email. You can send them to me on Twitter. You can post them on Facebook, on YouTube, in the comments, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll verify them and we'll make an episode to clarify their authenticity. Inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu fikum, jazakumullah khairan, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.